You guys remember Battlefield Bad Company? Came out around 2008, and it introduced destructible damage in Battlefield. It's like the best destruction in a game at that time. It was so good. It felt really good to just drive a tank through a house to kill the person you were looking for, or just destruct environments because you needed a new path. And a lot of games since then have done it, including a lot of Battlefield games and other games running on the Frostbite engine. But Star Citizen has their own systemic damage system going on. They call it Maelstrom. Now this is game-wide, and it applies to ships, armor, people, environments, all the things that can break. And one of the best parts about it is it actually should stop vehicles from getting stopped by items that shouldn't stop them, like thin trees and stuff like that. Sean Tracy talked about this before.
Oh, it's such a pet peeve. And chain link fences, you could have small trees will stop you, little rocks. Not forever, of course not. We're working internally on quite a large, I want to call it a refactor of our damage system, and it's called Maelstrom, and it's probably been talked about on Jared. I'm not sure how much or not Maelstrom has been discussed. Never. Okay. So basically, it's destructibles. It's how the ships break apart. It's how characters break apart. All these things, things that are in those levels with the tanks, especially with ground vehicles. All those should be physicalized within the world now.
Now that was about Arena Commander, but it is indicative of just how big this system will be for the game. So in today's feature watch, we're looking at systemic damage in Star Citizen. So this is a new system that was mainly introduced back at CitizenCon last year, but before then a couple of devs did talk about it before it was necessarily all that public to us.
With the engineers.
So it's more like an overall destructible physics system.
Yes, yeah. People have probably heard the word Maelstrom in various monthly reports and pieces.
Checking whether that's legit or
It's
not.
not
I'll wipe the board when we get back.
Right.
So that's the name of that overarching system. It's definitely been said.
It's funny because it was always happening at Jared's expense, which was just entertaining to watch. But it's not necessarily new. If you go back to 2015, you'll see a video they posted of how ships are supposed to be damaged based on the damage model that was used during the CryEngine days. But as with most things, it wasn't made for the persistent environment that we're in right now. It didn't work systemically across all ships. It wasn't a solution for the whole thing. It was just kind of a tech demo. So while this 2015 demo gives us an idea of what it was supposed to be, they've completely redone it for the engine that they've actually built now, called Star Engine. But like with most things, as you can see, the roots of this are like a decade old. Now this new system is mostly used for ships, as you'll see from the different videos we're watching throughout this video, but it is going to be used across our bases, across cover that you're taking when you're in a firefight, for objects in the world like usables, cargo, just a lot of different things, and it's way more in depth than just shoot something and it breaks. It actually depends on every little small piece that builds a ship, something that we're going to look at in a couple of minutes. But this goes all the way back to around 2017, 2018 when they were working on something called Item 2.0, when they started to assign specific characteristics to every item in the game. Now, they haven't actually covered this in a ton of depth since CitizenCon, but I'm bringing it up because a pretty big milestone seems to have been met in the last monthly report last week. Check it out. For Maelstrom, the development stream was recently published to the main internal branch. This means that other people in the game's development can start to use this in whatever it is they're making. Amongst allowing for large vehicle destruction, it also provides tools to link gameplay events with destruction sequences. So if something happens in a certain environment or in a mission or a dynamic event and something blows up or gets destroyed, I don't know, maybe like a space station, that can also trigger other things to happen. Not a big deal, but that's the update. It goes on to then say that the unified mesh format brings numerous improvements to the Vulkan pipeline. Yay, Vulkan! And further development will bring Maelstrom destruction entities past the existing legacy destruction and harden the existing pipeline. So, like that old demo we looked at showed some pretty good destruction modeling, and even now when you're shooting ships in the game, there's a lot of fragmentation and stuff breaking and shattering. It looks pretty good, but it doesn't really break up each part of the ship to allow it to be affected separately. It's just kind of an overall damage model of the ship. With this new model called Maelstrom, it actually takes every little piece of the ship and judges its characteristics to decide what the breakability of that piece would be. We're talking about characteristics like tensile strength, stress and strain through cantilever beam modeling, integrity, thickness, elasticity, yield strength, and even freaking Young's modulus. I feel like I'm back in my material science class in uni. This is more fun though. That cantilever beam modeling I mentioned is the most important part of this, I think, and it's actually a pretty big part of real-world engineering and materials. This may be a common way of doing it in other games, I wouldn't really know, but the implications of analyzing the structural integrity of things this way has some pretty crazy implications. It means when you land a shot with a large caliber weapon, where that shot hits could determine if you knock the wing off or you just punch a hole through it. It means puzzles can depend on where you place weights or objects to trigger other things from happening, or when you're platforming and jumping onto things, certain strategies might work and others might not if you jump too far away from a supported area. Now, this is probably something that's going to happen way more in Squadron 42, but the whole point of this system is that it is implemented into the engine so that anybody who's designing the actual missions and story in the game can use it if they see an option to. Hopefully they see options too. It also means that like cargo boxes can tip over objects or vehicles if you place them in the wrong place, and it adds a little bit more of the strategy to picking the center of gravity or wherever you're loading stuff in or out. The physics of the system's actually super far beyond Battlefield Bad Company, which probably makes sense since it's like 16 years old, but it's kind of crazy. Like I'm very interested in seeing how this will work and how they can transfer all the data. Let's talk about just how crazy the amount of data that needs to be transferred for this is. Because all of these objects that can break are modeled through breakable clusters, they call them. These clusters contain all the information that determines the joints and the connections between one part and all of the others, and how they can react to each other and the forces that are applied to them. That includes all the values I just mentioned, like yield strength and stress and strain and thickness. So here is what a Gladius looks like if you modeled it with just these breakable clusters. Every single one of those little points contains the information needed to determine whether or not it's going to break and what the forces might take for it to break. It's a lot. And like the Gladius is a small ship, like one of the smallest ships in the game. If you get up to the size of something like a Caterpillar, imagine all the different little pieces and things that need to be modeled for this kind of a system. This is insanity in my opinion. I can't imagine the amount of data that needs to be transferred for a dogfight or a big fleet battle to happen with all these different parts and pieces exploding and flying off in different directions, and then sending that back all through the replication layer to all these servers. It's what? But the idea ultimately behind this system is that it's going to allow everything in the game to be broken and maybe even possibly put back together. I think this will factor a lot into the repair gameplay that we will someday get, soon TM I guess. And all of these different characteristics we're looking at, like strength and stress and everything like that, will probably factor a lot into the crafting system too. Because you have to remember, with Item 2.0 and generally with the resource system they're building, every material in the game will actually have a value. So when you salvage a material, you'll get the value of that material you salvage from the ship. So if you had a Drake ship, let's say, which might have lower quality armor than other manufacturers, that would give you a different level of breakability with stress and thickness than maybe something like Aegis, who is building some large military grade capital bulkheads for applications that require more pew-pew. And at the end of the day, those values factor into the economy, they factor into your gameplay, into what you're doing when you build or craft. If you go back and look at the repair and maintenance document that was published for Star Citizen in 2015, you'll see actually a lot of talk about the materials and the specific elements used in these things. Now, I know it's crazy, but like this is what they're talking about. I don't know how good they're gonna be at actually nailing this down or how well it will work, but this is the goal that they're seemingly moving forward with. And ultimately, that should add a lot of depth to both our destructive gameplay and also our repairing gameplay that is helping to build things back up. Now, I don't know when this is happening. I don't think that this monthly report update means that it's right around the corner. I think it's still a ways out. They're probably getting this working for Squadron 42, and we'll see it at some time later. But they're clearly a lot closer to this than they were a year ago. And I think before it even reaches us, there are still a lot of questions to answer here. What happens if you blow up a base in the game? You know, a base where people are going for missions or for loot or just a regular stop off for outposts. if that all gets blown up, does it get repaired by the game? Does it automatically pop back up? Is it gone forever? How does that work? And then how does that work when it comes to player bases, when we can eventually start building our own structures? How do we protect them from being blown up outside of security? Or do we just have to deal with the fact that we might find them blown up and need to repair the whole building ourselves? There are things to talk about here, and hopefully we get more explanations as we move forward, but I don't think until we see this in Inside Star Citizen or Star Citizen Live and get a bunch of details on this, is it anywhere near ready. So while this was the topic of Feature Watch today, and I think it's a pretty cool feature to watch, I don't think it's coming anytime soon. When there is more info about it though, you should expect a tomato talk on it. I just wanted to give you guys a little update on what's going on with this system and let you know it even exists right now. Thank you for coming to the Feature Watch if you've never been to one of these. It's where I just pick something from the last week or two that I think is kind of interesting and tell you about my thoughts and maybe some of the history on it. As you can see, we've finally been able to move into our new studio. We do have internet, and I want to just thank everybody who watched our videos and paid attention to the content during these last few months, because there was just a lot going on. If you want to learn more about these features in development, I actually do streams Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, but on Mondays, we just sit as a community and talk about this stuff, go into deep dives on different features in the history. So you can come and check that out on this very channel or over on Twitch. I also have a second channel where they go get posted up after they're done, and those are more edited down and a little more streamlined. So if you like that, check out Space Tomato 2. Otherwise, hopefully this was a nugget of information for you and you learned something new. Thanks for checking this one out, and I'll see you in the next.